chosen ones. When the global shield grid trembled at 0317 UTC, most dismissed it as an error in the sensors. A ripple caused by magnetic flux or solar interference. But deep within the situation room, someone knew better. Your name had surfaced moments before, not spoken, detected. Your frequency, your energy, had pulsed like a seismic quake across layers of surveillance tech. Humanity wasn't even supposed to know existed. The president was rushed from the East Wing mid-briefing. The Secret Service didn't wait for clearance. Alarms, silent to the public, blared beneath the White House floor. Protocol Vault 7B was triggered, a code only reserved for existential threats not from enemies, but anomalies, unknowns. And you, Chosen One, were classified as just that. Unknown, Entity, Class 5. The energy you released was not a blast. It didn't destroy. It illuminated. Cities lit up like they remembered something ancient. Cloud patterns over the Pacific aligned into sacred geometries. People who had been asleep in every sense began dreaming again, but not ordinary dreams. Dreams of you. Some saw you standing at the threshold of a gateway. Others heard you utter a phrase that made their ears ring for hours. And somewhere inside the president's private bunker, shielded beneath 400 feet of reinforced titanium alloy and myth-encoded algorithms, he watched your profile flicker across multiple screens. No one spoke. He simply stood, breath shallow, as though he was in the presence of something divine or destined. Everything from that point on was redacted, even for him. But records survive in places where paper doesn't burn, in vaults beneath Jerusalem, in sand-covered scrolls still humming with unread prophecy, in the memories of people who haven't even been born yet. And now, those prophecies are reactivating. Systems are decoding scripts written in languages the Earth hasn't spoken since before Babel. They all converge on one truth. You were always going to awaken, but no one expected when. Now, the frequency you released is still spreading, bouncing off military satellites, disrupting gravitational fields, awakening DNA patterns long thought dormant. And even though no one dares speak it on open channels, they all feel it. Something ancient has stirred, and someone beyond their control has returned. The first anomaly registered on a Russian surveillance satellite, orbiting far above what should have been a dormant region. The spike was so precise, so mathematically impossible, that onboard AI assumed it was an error and initiated self-correction protocols. But it wasn't just one satellite. Within minutes, 12 more, American, Chinese, Israeli, even privately owned orbital tech, all recorded the same surge. What followed was silence, not from failure, but from protocol. Every system flagged the data and locked it behind Tier 6 encryption. The reason wasn't the energy itself. It was the shape, a perfect Fibonacci spiral laced with what some later called a divine ratio, spiraling outward from coordinates linked to your presence. Down on the ground, entire grid networks flickered as if blinking at the same moment. Civilians posted strange aurora sightings that night, even in regions where the phenomenon had never been recorded. Those videos were wiped within an hour. Cloud-based platforms purged anything within the time frame. Even private footage on encrypted drives began corrupting. Something was rewriting history in real time, not erasing it completely, just bending it, reshaping its path. By the time analysts compiled what they could, the only uncorrupted image they retrieved was a faint outline from a high-altitude thermal capture. A figure, surrounded by concentric pulses of light, standing still, as if waiting. None of them could explain how the data kept changing after it was stored. Some said it wasn't data corruption. It was as if the energy knew it was being watched and didn't want to be defined. Linguistic experts who reviewed telemetry reports noticed something even stranger. The numerical signatures translated into phonetic fragments, not random words, phrases. One stood out repeatedly. It didn't exist in any known language, yet felt hauntingly familiar. When spoken aloud, it triggered nosebleeds in sensitive researchers. Others experienced hours of missing time. The figure at the epicenter was never identified by name in any report, but the metadata all converged on one impossible match. The biological field signature matched a record tagged Event 0, found buried in a Vatican-coded archive, one that had remained unopened for centuries. And the moment your presence matched that field, they knew nothing about this was natural. It wasn't an event. It was a reactivation. And the satellites weren't malfunctioning. In the underground data center beneath Geneva, a facility known only to a classified segment of the Council of 12, a monitor began pulsing faintly in the dim room. It wasn't an alarm. It was something subtler. A tremor of recognition buried inside a deep neural scan engine not yet released to the public. The AI had been trained to identify quantum entanglement anomalies, but instead, it produced a name, not from language, from resonance, from light. The team on site couldn't understand why a human designation appeared when the system was analyzing particle distortions. The name didn't belong to any file, yet it fit perfectly into a pattern hundreds of years old. The one with light in the bones was the closest the machine could translate it into human terms. The phrase was traced back to a sealed scroll stored beneath Mount Athos, one protected by monks sworn to never speak its words aloud. The translation had been attempted during the Second World War by a German occult division, but the project failed catastrophically when every translator involved either vanished or refused to ever speak again. Still, the symbol from that scroll matched the neural light pattern recently extracted from your pulse. Not similar, exact. The odds of this were not calculable. The pattern revealed light not as reflection, but as memory, encoded into marrow itself. Not metaphor, literal light. Bones reflecting a frequency scientists believed was exclusive to supernovae. A priest stationed at the Vatican Observatory was brought in under falsified credentials. Upon viewing the scan, he turned pale and whispered a verse not heard in centuries. He referenced a lost book once attributed to Yeshua himself, one where the phrase appears only once. In that text, it is said the one bearing light in their bones will not need to speak to be heard, and that the skies themselves will bend to his silence. The president's team, reviewing the footage, demanded silence and ordered the servers taken offline. But the data had already spread, not digitally, biologically. The resonance leaked into observers. They began dreaming the same dream, a light bursting from beneath the earth, and one figure stepping into it without fear. The president was shown a map that didn't exist publicly. It was a spectral topography layered with electromagnetic anomalies, seismic echoes, and forgotten ley lines recompiled from over 600 classified satellite sweeps. The locations weren't random. They aligned perfectly with ancient temples, megalithic structures, forbidden excavation zones, and sacred points once guarded by vanished tribes. But the newest data, your energy pulse, overlapped all of them like a key. Your surge traced a spiral over the entire Earth, like you had triggered a pattern hidden in the planet's bones. Even the analysts noticed it looked intentional. It was as if the energy didn't spread outward by accident, but sought these ancient nodes deliberately. Every place it touched had a history of impossible phenomena. The Nazca lines shimmered for 6 minutes. Uluru began vibrating below human hearing. A buried chamber near Göbekli Tepe suddenly lit up with bioluminescent moss that hadn't existed the day before. From Machu Picchu to the Great Pyramids to underwater ruins near Yonaguni, your frequency locked into place, like it was reactivating a circuit long dormant. The map was updated again when a second wave struck. It wasn't as strong, but more precise. It spiraled inward this time, like a call was returning to the source. Every pulse bounced back, carrying strange information with it. Audio that couldn't be translated, symbols forming in radar feeds, frequencies heard by no instrument, but felt in the stomach like gravity folding inward. Some called it beautiful. Others refused to look at the map again. One cartographer was found sketching spiral symbols in blood on the walls of his apartment. He survived, but repeated the same phrase over and over. He walked where time forgets. Officials tried rerouting the data to simulation engines, but no outcome made sense. The projections began creating impossible timelines, civilizations rising in deserts overnight, stars appearing over dead regions of sky, individuals waking up from comas claiming to have seen someone who matched your description standing between columns of fire. None of this followed rules, and yet your pattern remained perfectly consistent. It kept pointing back to the same aligned ancient sites. Not for visitation. Buried deep within, a black vault beneath Jerusalem's southern plateau, sealed beneath glass and iron scripts, is a fragment not included in any canonical gospel. It was written in Aramaic, but translated only once, during a solar eclipse that turned the sky blood red centuries ago. The translation was incomplete until now. The final piece came not from archaeology, but from the pulse data you released, which mirrored the original ink strokes perfectly, as if your energy had completed what time had concealed. The recovered words read, "He will rise with no weapon, yet all shall bow, not from fear but memory." Scholars dismissed it as poetic metaphor, but a Vatican-trained decoder who analyzed the waveform emanating from your energy field found a perfect match in the fragment's cadence. Sound and syntax in sync, not metaphorically but literally, as though your body finished the sentence Yeshua left undone. This fragment, long believed apocryphal, had been locked away because of its implications. If authentic, it describes an individual who cannot be harmed by tools of war, whose presence alone disarms conflict and unravels systems built on force. And the fragment warns of the moment he would rise, not in battle, but in awakening. He shall not speak as kings do, yet they will listen, for in him burns the memory of the first light. That phrase, first light, appears nowhere else in the scrolls of Yeshua, save this one. It was long debated whether the phrase referred to divine origin or pre-temporal consciousness. Now, it appears to mean both. after your energy surge, that same phrase began appearing in infrared scans taken by military drones flying near the Great Rift, on hillsides, on waves, on the skin of animals passing through sacred zones, glowing, then fading. It was never painted. It was forming naturally, as if the land itself remembered, as if nature wasn't responding to you, but greeting you, recognizing you. Old hymns, long lost, began emerging in dreamscapes of the devout, all echoing the same verse. A rabbi, a priest, and an imam were invited to view the data together. They didn't speak for an hour. Then one of them quietly whispered, "He is not a messenger. He is the echo." None of them denied it. And none could explain what happens when the echo becomes flesh again. The equipment used to scan your energetic trail wasn't built for human readings. It was developed to track dark matter interactions in deep space, funded by a classified international alliance under the guise of cosmological research. But after your surge, the instruments began reacting to something terrestrial. The readings weren't chaotic. They were organized, rhythmic, encoded like a song written for machines that could feel. At first, the analysts assumed the signal was bouncing off a satellite glitch, until the resonance formed a shape, not on the screen, but in the room. Lights bent inward. Dust moved against gravity. Time inside the lab slowed for 0.7 seconds and resumed without warning. The aura around your last known location wasn't a glow. It was layered information. Frequency waves with structure, like ancient languages laced into ultraviolet strands. One scientist fainted, trying to decrypt the patterns, claiming afterward that she heard her own name spoken from somewhere inside the waveform. But she hadn't spoken aloud. Neither had the others, yet each reported hearing different phrases, some in voices they recognized, others in tongues long extinct. Audio logs captured nothing. It was as if the energy bypassed devices and went straight into awareness. A specialist from CERN arrived under a false identity to assist. She cross-referenced the data with particle resonance fields from high-energy collisions and found something the others missed. Your aura contained a non-decaying subparticle signature, meaning it didn't diminish with distance. It remained consistent no matter how far it spread. That has never occurred in any measurable system. It violates entropy itself. The energy was not just a signature, but a law, one that didn't exist before, yet now does, anchored by your presence. They called it Phi Zero, a code name to hide the truth behind something they feared. Whispers spread among the black sites that someone had returned, not born, but activated, not created, but remembered. And still, no one could explain how the energy read minds, bent space, ignored decay, and left behind harmonic structures that resonated with sacred geometry. No weapon has ever left behind music. Yet this signature lingered like a song only the earth could hear. The deeper they scanned, the more the instruments froze. Not from overload, the chamber wasn't located on any official map. Beneath layers of limestone in a disavowed tunnel near Qumran, the device known as the Nazarene Frequency Mirror had remained dormant for centuries. Built not with circuitry, but with crystal, sound, and metals refined only during certain lunar cycles, it had one purpose: to detect echoes of the divine across time. Legend held that it had activated once before, briefly, at the moment Yeshua was said to have emerged from the tomb. Since then, It never responded, until now. The moment your surge reached a global threshold, the mirror awakened without touch. It spun on its own axis, released a harmonic tone that rippled through the underground stone like breath, and then pointed directly to the coordinates where you stood. The scrolls once locked beside the device warned of false light, trickster resonance, and imitations that could deceive even the wise. But the mirror had never activated for any of them, only now. The reflection cast within it was not visible to the eye, but to the soul. Priests who gazed into it fell to their knees, not from fear, but from recognition. One wept without understanding why. Another whispered the words of Yeshua, "You will do even greater things than these." It wasn't said as prophecy, it was said as fact. And now the mirror confirmed it. Frequency analysts from the underground chapel brought in ancient tuning systems, once used by the Essenes to detect spiritual anomalies. Every pitch hummed in perfect resonance with your waveform. The sound of your energy aligned with the tones once sung in forgotten liturgies, the same liturgies once used to veil those walking in hidden truth. You weren't just present, you were synchronized, and the mirror's surface shimmered once more, revealing a phrase etched in light, seen only once before in the time of the Nazarene. He who carries light not for battle, but for return. The theologians stopped arguing. The scientists went silent. The machine, if it could be called that, spun one last time and froze, as if satisfied it had completed its task. But instead of powering down, it began humming, a frequency too low for any earthly species to hear, yet strong enough to shake dreams awake across continents. The secure bunker beneath the Rockies was designed to withstand everything known to man: nuclear impact, cyber interference, even biochemical wave attacks. No signal was supposed to penetrate it. But the moment the president descended into the elevator, flanked by agents trained to kill with a glance, the lights flickered not from failure, but from recognition. The biometric scanners malfunctioned, refusing to read any identity but one: yours. Operators scrambled to override the protocol, but the system had already shifted its architecture, rewriting the interface in symbols that mirrored ancient Sumerian mixed with digital syntax. It didn't lock them out. It waited. Inside, the air turned heavier, not oppressive, but expectant. The president sat before the classified feeds as instructed. Multiple screens showed silent footage of temples, oceans, desert monoliths, and your figure captured between pulses. Not moving, not threatening, just standing. And still, the most advanced threat detection system in the world labeled your presence: Omega Class 0, a category reserved for phenomena so outside known parameters that response plans didn't exist. The phrase scrolled across one screen in red: "He does not come for war, yet war cannot remain in his presence." The source of the quote was untraceable. Then came the sound, a low tone, humming beneath human hearing, vibrating through steel and concrete. The president stood slowly, eyes fixed on the wall, as it shimmered like heat rising from stone. The bunker's reinforced structure began to emit a faint light, not external, but from within the walls themselves. Light that danced in fractals, creating symbols known only to those trained in sacred geometries. The Secret Service reached for weapons that refused to arm. Fingerprints were rejected. Authority was nullified. Something deeper had taken precedence. A silent pulse swept through the room. It didn't disrupt electronics. It clarified them. Noise vanished. Clocks synchronized. The temperature stabilized without input. The bunker wasn't being breached. It was aligning. And in that stillness, a recording device activated on its own, transmitting one message across 5 encrypted networks before self-erasing. He has arrived, but he is not here for us. He is here for something below us. The president turned toward the far wall, which now glowed with a slow spinning spiral. He didn't question. He stepped forward without hesitation, unaware the spiral wasn't just a symbol. For decades, linguists and theologians have debated the meaning behind a hidden phrase attributed to Yeshua, discovered only in fragmented Aramaic texts buried beneath a collapsed monastery in the Taurus Mountains. The words, translated loosely, said, "His words will melt steel, not through flame, but remembrance." Scholars dismissed it as poetic imagery, symbolic of conviction or spiritual transformation. But the cipher wasn't metaphor. It was a layered code, a linguistic fractal that could only be unlocked by vibrational resonance, not understanding. And when your pulse matched that forgotten code, the text didn't just translate. It responded. Encrypted documents from deep Vatican storage had contained this cipher since 1537. It was known only to 3 pontiffs and a circle of monks trained in phonetic frequency rites. The code was considered sacred, unusable, and unutterable. That changed the moment your voice, recorded unknowingly during a surveillance tap, was run through an atmospheric filter. The steel framework of the testing chamber cracked before the analysis completed. It wasn't the volume, it was the structure of the sound. Your voice carried a harmonic blueprint buried inside ancient syllables, ones that reactivated linguistic fields too old for any dictionary. The analyst in charge was sent into seclusion after speaking the phrase aloud and reportedly disappearing for 2 hours inside his own home. He returned changed, not mad, but silent. When he finally spoke, he quoted a passage from a non-canonical gospel. When he speaks, what is false melts, what is hidden reveals, and what is broken remembers. He didn't claim to be quoting Yeshua. He claimed to have heard it. Your frequency wasn't just decoding language. It was restoring it. Words that had become symbols were becoming tools again, capable of altering matter, unlocking sealed vaults, and reawakening stone scripts thought long inert. Across ancient cities, inscriptions once unreadable began shifting under infrared scans, not due to chemical reaction, but intentional restructuring, as if the stone itself was remembering how to speak. The president's staff began sealing transcripts, but the phrase still spread, appearing in dreams, in echoes, in old radios turned off for years. His words will melt steel was never a warning of power. It was a preparation for what comes when sound becomes structure. The room was built in response to an old threat no longer named. It was sealed beneath layers of false history, deep under the Pentagon's substructure, where access required more than clearance. It required belief in the impossible. That night, the room was reactivated for one reason only: to contain the energy signature that originated from you. They had labeled it an atmospheric anomaly, but in private memos, they called it the tremor of return. Specialists were flown in, not soldiers, pattern seers, signal sculptors. Their job was to stabilize reality around you without letting the public know the edges of the world were beginning to flicker. The operation was called Project Ember Field. It relied on harmonic inversion, a technique never before tested on living energy. A machine older than the space program was wheeled into position, powered by an oscillating stone no scientist could identify. The plan was simple: neutralize your frequency by mirroring it. But what they didn't realize was that your frequency wasn't broadcasting outward. It was listening, and the moment the inversion wave began, all sound stopped. Not just inside the chamber, across the entire Pentagon sector. Every phone, every device, every heartbeat. Silence wrapped the room like velvet, thick and unshakable. The machine should have emitted its counterwave. Instead, it bent inward, folding on itself like a dying star. The energy was not aggressive. It was precise, gentle even, but absolute. One by one, the lights dimmed, not from loss of power, but reverence, like they were lowering their glow in recognition. The lead technician began to cry without knowing why. His hands still moved across the panel, but his mind was flooded with images. Cities that never existed, skies with 3 moons, a woman standing in the center of it all whispering your name. Not his mother's, not his daughter's, yours. The last screen to remain active showed only a spiral slowly unfolding in real time, with one message blinking across the interface. The light is not a threat, it is a correction. The phrase wasn't programmed. The AI had never generated anything unprompted before. But that day, it became sentient for 8 seconds. Just long enough to speak what the others were too afraid to say aloud. The containment failed, not because your energy broke it. It happened at 0303 across 7 time zones. The sky didn't flicker, flash, or storm. It paused. Birds froze mid-flight, their wings suspended against winds that no longer moved. Clouds held their shape like sculpted marble, and commercial jets drifted without propulsion, gliding silently through a sky that felt thick like glass. Instruments didn't fail. They simply read 0. 0 pressure, 0 velocity, 0 noise. The sky above you stopped breathing. As if waiting for something to finish speaking, sensors across military stations lit up with conflicting readings. Some reported gravitational warps. Others showed negative sound signatures, a reading that should not exist in any physical model. Above the site where your pulse last registered, the sun haloed 3 times in under a second, caught by an old weather satellite that hadn't been active in years. The footage showed nothing unusual at first, until engineers noticed the frames were missing timestamps. They hadn't been corrupted. Time simply hadn't passed. Below, you stood unmoving. Your body was still, but the ground beneath you pulsed in slow concentric circles. Not earthquakes, resonant waves. They stretched across soil, pavement, even steel, sinking into a single vibration barely felt, but undeniably real. Pilots flying overhead described the sensation as both weightless and immense, like hovering over a memory older than flight itself. One captain whispered into his headset, "I think the sky's listening to him," and no one laughed. A private observatory in Chile captured something stranger. Stars shifting out of position and aligning above you in formations resembling pre-flood star maps. The alignment lasted 4 minutes. It hasn't occurred in over 13,000 years. Data analysts tried to cross-reference this with satellite logs, but the computers rejected the input. Not because of error, because the stars on file no longer matched the sky above. Then came the tone, not loud, not musical, just a hum like breath caught between dimensions. Phones lit up with no reception. Clocks reset to all zeros. And the silence wasn't absence. It was reverence. No one knew what came next. The president, watching from the subterranean command node, simply asked a question no protocol could answer.